Okay. All right, nice crowd today. Thank you for coming out, and I think everyone's going to be real excited about our plan, and look forward to it. Michelle, you want to do a little introduction of our...
Sure. So with us in the room today, we have Tom McGilloway. He is with Mahan Rykiel. And on Zoom, we have Trip Muldrow, who's with Arnett, Muldrow and Associates. And they did the original downtown plan, and now we're on phase 2. And some of you talked to them when they were here gathering information earlier, late last year. And we're really excited to see the plan. Tom?
Great, thank you, Lachelle. Thanks, everyone. So I have 2 mute buttons and a mouse to control and a presentation to give, so what can go wrong? We're really happy to be here today. As Lachelle said, we're focusing on phase 2 of the master plan. So the meeting outline will give a context for phase 2 and how it relates to some of the previous work we've done. Trip will give a market snapshot, and then we'll talk about the phase 2 recommendations and focus area plans. I have several slides, have some text slides that are descriptive. I'm not going to go into great detail on those. It's mainly for when this is online, if anyone's looking at it online and wanted to read it in more detail. So I might breeze through some of those pretty quickly. So the context, this is the current master plan as part of Leonardtown's comp plan that you've all been using and referring to. It served the town very well with a lot of the improvements that have already been made. And then when we did the downtown strategic plan, our focus was really on the area shaded in red, the square, some of the immediate areas there, and we kind of loosely looked at connections to the waterfront and connections off to the west. Now the focus of phase 2 is more on the west, how it links back to downtown, how the downtown interfaces with the Tudor Hall Farms project, and then the connection along the waterfront from the Wharf off to the port of Leonardtown. This was the green areas in this plan represent publicly town-owned properties, which is really a wonderful asset for the community. Most of this is kind of unbuildable land, steep slopes and stream valleys, but there is a section right in the, if you see my mouse, right in the center here that has some fairly level ground, and that will be, we'll be talking about more opportunities for that. That's just one area within all this open space that could have some more active recreation and not just passive. So the focus of what we'll be going through tonight is we'll be looking at the trail linkage along the waterfront and various connections there. We'll be looking at, for a long time, the town has been looking at a hotel conference center. We'll be talking about that. This potential active park space I talked about, and then some of the interface of the square with the area to the west. So I'm going to turn this over to Trip now, and he'll give a market snapshot, and let's see that I do this without, I got to mute myself and unmute him. Okay. No. So we're not hearing him. I thought I did that. It's not coming through.
Testing.
Okay, now we hear you. Yeah, that's.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm getting a thumbs up from Tom that you can hear me. I'm the person that's standing in the way between the incredible plans and the rest of the presentation, but we like to ground any of these with kind of market reality, and market understanding. A lot of this is something that will not come to a surprise to many of you. The population in the area continues to really soar. I pulled a drop point basically of the intersection right by the square and did a 10-minute drive time and a 20-minute drive time. And in the next 5 years, and this is a 2026 projection, there'll be 8,302 residents within a 10-minute drive time of downtown, 66,741 within a 20-minute drive time. These projections are a little blind because they don't know about where the developable land is. So, just keep in mind that the allocation could be a little different. This translates into 178 new households and 1,388 new households in a 20-minute drive time. So again, you all know what the growth looks like. It's all looking like it's going to continue to be for the foreseeable future. And as far as the housing opportunities, when we kind of look at what the building permit trends have been, one of the things that's really important to note is that, and we're seeing this in a lot of places, this is happening in St. Mary's County as well, is a shift from just doing single-family detached units to doing more and more multifamily units. And we're seeing a progression of time of that happening in St. Mary's County and in Leonardtown as well. I don't expect that shift to go away. We're seeing more and more people interested in living in either condos or apartments, particularly walking distance to downtowns. And looks like, what you're able to capture into the downtown has already been market proven by the status of your existing units that pretty much fill up as soon as they become available. So the housing opportunities are strong as well. We also looked at the retail leakage, and for those of you familiar with kind of the prior work, this is just a refresher of what data we've shared in past plans. We look at retail leakage, we're looking at the same kind of drive time area. I think I'm looking at 10 minutes and 20 minutes in certain cases, but this looks at what consumers are spending versus what retail store types or restaurants are selling. So the opportunities here are pretty remarkable as we look at each of the slides ahead. So in a 20-minute drive time, you're looking at about $1 billion market. Consumers are spending $1.25 billion. So we're looking at still $178 million in retail leakage in a 20-minute drive time. Just keep in mind, when we get up to a 20-minute drive time, we are getting over to California, to the highway-oriented commercial that includes places like Target and Walmart and the fast food restaurants and so forth that are in that area. So I look at capture scenarios. You're never going to get all that money back. People are still going to go to Washington. They're still going to go, to other places to do certain shopping. Metro area. So, and then we're really looking at capture scenario for this kind of target area in downtown. So I look at, between 20 and 30% of the value potentially being able to be captured in. This is conservative. It may seem a little robust with a 20-minute drive time, but I think your share is probably worth it. And it's conservative because it doesn't account for that growth that's maybe ahead in the future. And it only accounts the people who live within that 20-minute drive time. So anyone who's a visitor who comes in from outside would not be factored into these retail opportunities. So it does tend toward the conservative end of the spectrum. So when we look at, the top opportunities are ones that I think you kind of already know about. There continues to be a dining opportunity gap. We're looking at 19.1 million in leakage. If I'm looking at sales per square foot of 400, and again, these numbers can be modified depending on what retailer is or what restaurateur is looking. We're looking at about 14,300 square feet right now, at a 30% capture rate. Again, very conservative, giving some options for additional. And what we see in dining, and I think you all understand this because you're experiencing it in Leonardtown, is that dining ends up being a clustering experience. So in a walkable district, people oftentimes over time will go to the district and then decide where to eat rather than make a decision to go to a particular restaurant and go to the district to that restaurant. It's a little different in a downtown setting than it will be in a suburban setting. You know, and we've all kind of experienced this in communities where it's like, okay, well, let's just meet here and then we'll decide where we want to go. The next one was an interesting one, is furniture and home, I should read furniture and home furnishings. And furniture is the stuff that you sit on and eat off of, and home furnishings are the things that you put on the stuff that you sit on and eat off of. So it's kind of like that home decor piece. With a growing population, a lot of the people moving, you know, establishing households, that demand is very high. And this is a great cluster. Furniture maybe not so much, but home furnishings for a downtown. People really do like that kind of cluster. And we see this bearing out with the success of existing retailers already in Leonardtown and with Shepherd's Oldfield that deals a lot with things that would be characterized as home furnishings, you know, accessories for the home. And then, of course, coming into this, we almost always see leakage in the clothing category. Folks are still going to shop online. They're still going to go to a big department store for some of that shopping. So I'm only looking at 10% capture rates for the furniture and furnishings, for the clothing and accessories. I still think 90% may, you know, disappear, but we're still looking at a couple of, you know, boutiques that could come in. The fourth one here is the specialty food and beverage, and I want to distinguish this from the restaurant and dining. So specialty food and beverage is where this is food that's for consumption off premises. So, you know, whether it's a six-pack of craft beer, or a bottle of wine, or a, you know, fish to take and cook at home, or, you know, cheese to take home. And we're looking at 5.1 million leakage in the specialty food and beverage. This is a really big growing category. So I did bump it up to 20% capture rate, and I believe that's sustainable for additional kind of pieces. And you already have some of that in downtown Leonardtown. Arts gift specialty is kind of a hybrid of a variety of very high level SAIC S codes. And we're looking at about $10 million leakage. I did a 20% capture rate, so we're looking at about 6,500 right as we stand. So just based on existing numbers, we're looking at about 40,000 square feet of supportable space just where we sit. So the market demand is real, and you've already done just amazing work in the community. The business is already in a great mix. What we see is a continued interest in places that are walkable, convenient for people to live, and have a variety of options. So this just helps either expand existing businesses or look at new business locations over time in the area that we're studying. Then I could spend a lot of time on hotel. There's been a report that was done that it primarily looked at the meeting market and the small meeting market on the weekends. But we're seeing some trends that, you know, with your occupancy, your average daily rates in the county are increasing, your occupancy rates are increasing. And so this really does point to an opportunity for a hotel within the project area. The Holiday Inn over in Calvert County, we understand is going to likely be converting to a different use. And so that takes the only full service property in the region off of the playing field. This further reinforces the need for a full service hotel. And you've already seen this because of the success of the Inn. As it's been rebranded, it stays fairly busy, and its rates are very competitive in the region. And certainly, this is not a new concept. This idea of the hotel and some sort of meeting facility has been discussed in Leonardtown for many years. So the time really looks good. And here are some other reasons to kind of back it up. You know, we hear through work that we're currently doing with Visit St. Mary's. Hello, Barbara, if you're in the audience. And work with, you know, continue work in Leonardtown and with economic development at the county level. A big shift in leisure stays. So your Airbnb market kind of blew up over COVID because people in the metro areas really did come and fill up places. The Inn of Leonardtown, again, is demonstrating the success of a downtown hotel. And then you're continuing to be that special dining and shopping destination. And we see this as an opportunity to be that place where an amenity-rich, full-service hotel could be a real strength for Leonardtown and for St. Mary's County overall, and be a regional attraction. So with that, Tom, I'll kick it back up.
I muted you too soon, Trip, so you're now silenced. So if you want to say anything, raise your hand. Thank you for that. So we're going to now hit on, so Trip identified some market numbers and square footage and opportunities, and we're going to look at where, I don't know why this is not working, where they could fit on in Leonardtown. So we have this overall master plan. There's a hard copy up here. There's a lot of detail on this, so you're not going to see it. We'll be zooming in on the different areas, but essentially, we have the wharf down here. The square is right in this area. The hotel conference center here, and then this is all the orange parcels or Tudor Hall Farm development projects, and we'll zoom in on some of these areas. So the focus areas, first we want to talk about the waterfront, and one of the things that Tripp and his team did was take some of the community branding they did and look at how some of that might be extended to some of these different districts. So the waterfront, we're really looking at the Wharf area moving westward along the frontage of the Tudor Hall Farms property, and the goal here is really to expand access and extend the waterfront of Leonardtown. So providing more activities along the waterfront and the beyond the wharf itself, showcasing and respecting the natural environment, linking amenities with a multi-purpose trail, and then very importantly connecting existing and future neighborhoods throughout Leonardtown to the waterfront in this trail network. So if we zoom in, we see the wharf at the bottom. This is the existing boardwalk. There'd be an extension of that. And then this is a part where the steep slopes come right up to the water edge, so that would be built along the water. And then the trail really starts to work up and follow the natural topography and follow along on a bluff overlooking the water. And now I'll zoom in and talk about each of these projects. This is the hotel site and the Overlook site. We'll zoom in there. So the wharf itself, some enhancement we talked about there. When we were here for our earlier meetings, we heard a desire to increase some of the amenities there, family amenities, as well as some maybe some accommodations for food. We think the right scale is not necessarily a full-scale restaurant, but maybe a food hall or establishment. You can maybe start off with food trucks, but then it could be a, similar to Shepherd's Old Field, a hall that accommodates different venues. It might be restaurant startups or an existing restaurant in town that wants to sell a limited product at the waterfront. Expanding parking resources, having a place for the historic carousel. And so the plan here, we think it's really important to respect the existing structure of the waterfront, the open lawn area that you have here. This is the playground and the vistas to the water. What we're looking at is enhancing the parking lot, perhaps looking at opportunities to expand some of the parking. And then the carousel, splash pad, and then food hall are organized in a raised boardwalk, so it'd be above flood elevation, but they're all organized. They create this active edge that frames rather than fills that open space. In this next view, might be a little easier to understand. This is a perspective sketch. So this is the existing building that's down here, the drop off, the open lawn, and then you can see that these pavilion nature of the food hall, the carousel cover, and the splash pad on this raised boardwalk, and then the expanded parking behind. Off to the left, lower left, you see the kind of the continuation of that boardwalk along the waterfront connecting over to Tudor Hall Farm. Zooming in then on the food hall itself, and some of the inspiration for this architecturally. Again, these are just master plan level, so they're kind of just giving a design intent. When the actual project, we'll get into the actual design of it. But there's an opportunity to recall some of the forms from the original ice house that was there. I'll get to that in a minute. So the splash pad, we're thinking it's a splash feature that's, when it's not in use, it's just expanded paving that could be used for other gathering or tables or something like that, not a water feature that when it's not in use, it looks like an empty water feature. So a multi-use of the space, similar to these examples here. When these are turned off, it just becomes more plaza space. This is the old ice, I forget, it wasn't called an ice house, it was ice, there was another name that was on the photo anyway. But this was, and this was, is Jerry here? Jerry?
She's in there.
Okay, she was in there. She had a great idea when we were here last time. She said, why don't we call the food hall the ice house? And I was just commending you. Great idea. So this is the form of the building, and you can see how that can be replicated here. The one thing we're going to add to this sketch is you can actually see there's a rooftop area on this building. I'm not sure, that might have just been screening of mechanical equipment, but there might be an opportunity to do a roof deck that could be a leasable space, have party space up there or events. So we'll update this sketch to show that. That could be a really exciting opportunity to take advantage of the waterfront. And then just some examples. Food halls are really popping up in cities all over the place. They have real kind of with garage doors that open, the indoors spill out to the outdoors. They become the social meeting places, and so this could really help activate the waterfront. But there's an opportunity to kind of pick up on the design themes, the industrial, the wharf design themes, rather than trying to create something that is foreign to Leonardtown. And then these are just some outlines of some of the things that could occur there. I think the big thing is it could be startup space for new restaurants, or work with existing restaurants to just be able to extend their products down to the waterfront. Some key implementing actions that we think is important. One, we think it's important to visit some food halls. They're popping up in communities all over the place. Visit some and just what's the right model for you. Work with some local developers and investors to explore and test the interest, especially some local restaurateurs. We'll obviously create a more detailed design concept with the food hall, the carousel, and the splash feature. Prepare a pro forma to make sure it works, and then explore some funding options, and especially for how there could be some funding options for some of the public infrastructure that we need to support this project. In the short term, you could start to kind of generate interest and a buzz for this with just, there might be some food trucks that pull down there, have food truck events there, get people used to the idea of more activity and food being available down there. The second project that we want to talk about, a focus area, is the amphitheater. We're calling this the Overlook. The goal here is to provide a flexible space. I want to emphasize the flexibility. It could be for performances, but it could also be for other types of community gatherings. So it shouldn't be a design that, again, looks like an empty performance space when it's not in use. It should, the stage could become a pavilion for some big events. The terrace area could be used for tables and some other event. But respond to the landform. This is the site, the amphitheater site right in this. This is on a ridge. There's two kind of drainage ravines on each side of it. This is the Wharf, for context, and the hotel over here. So you can see this would be really integrated with the trail system that runs along the waterfront. And if we zoom in a little more, we think it's important to have some direct access off of Washington Street, and then have a parking area, not accommodate all of the parking here. One, there's not enough room, but you want to encourage people to park throughout downtown and walk here along the trail system. And then open lawn area. There may be some terrace walls, a stage area. So as you're in here looking down the slope, you're looking out to Breton Bay as well. And then here's a perspective sketch of what that might look like. this drop-off area. This could also, if for some reason the carousel doesn't work at the waterfront, at the wharf, this may be an alternative location for it. Again, you see the trail coming up, the Greenway network that links over to the hotel. The stage could be something very transparent that you could see through to the water. Just some examples. The lower left is a great example of a stage feature that, when it's not used as a stage, it could just be a covered pavilion for an outdoor event. But very, lawn areas, there might be some terrace walls, but the space could be set up for other events other than just performances as well. And some key implementing actions there, again, would encourage looking at some amphitheaters in other communities to really understand what's the right fit for here. That land area is somewhat limited in size geographically, but surrounded by ravines, so probably the 1,200 to 1,500 person capacity is what would work. And then, one thing to think about is there a desire for revenue generating events that you'd want to be able to kind of gate it off and have ticket sales, or is that not something you're looking at? So those are things that you'd explore in a more detailed exploration. The Hotel Conference Center, we branded as the Lodge at Tudor Hall Farm. This is an image I just got off the internet, but it kind of conveys that this shouldn't just be your typical meeting space with windowless conference rooms, but really take advantage of the setting overlooking Breton Bay architecturally, looking at maybe starting off with 125 rooms, being able to expand to 250, really amenity rich, take advantage of the water rooms, water views, and we have what we're calling cottage wings that could be, we're seeing a trend in small groups wanting, or family reunions, family wanting to get a cluster of rooms together, and you'll see this concept shortly. And then having some meeting space with breakout rooms, an on-site restaurant, and it'll really be the only facility in a three-county region. So this is overall plan. You saw down at the lower right is the overlook that we just looked at. We'll zoom in on the conference center. Building 1 might be phase 1 of the hotel. That's 125 rooms, with building 2 as expansion wing. These items numbered 5 are what we're calling the cottage wings. They could actually be built out on platform over. This is a hillside right here, so they could be in the trees, cantilevered over the hillside, and this could be meeting space, restaurant, and then maybe even some outdoor meeting space here as well. And then a perspective sketch of this showing the meeting space. Take advantage of the landform for some of the service areas down at a lower level down below, and then you can have some parking down at this lower level, and these are the cottage wings that on the hillside that you could see overlook. And this might be a cluster of, it could be a separate meeting room where you could have breakout meeting space here, or it could be a cluster of a couple lodging rooms in this space too, for a family reunion or small group that wanted to have their own cluster. But something that could really be unique for the region, and most importantly, take advantage of that site, that natural, the trees and the hillside and the views to the waterfront. And then just some imagery of kind of the scale that we think is appropriate, not a high-rise multi-floor. It's probably 2 or 3 floors, separate building components that really convey some of the character of what this could be. Some implementing actions that you can continue to vet the concept with some developers. There'll need to be a more robust market study with this that starts to look at some of the profit points, the margins, and the return on investment. And then the town should be prepared to offer some incentives in the form of, it might be some land write-downs or public-private partnership with the conference center, the meeting component of this, or maybe some of the parking or amenity areas as well. So that would need to be explored. So we looked at we looked at the Wharf, the Overlook, and the Conference Center along the waterfront, but what connects all of this? And I think the Greenway, and we're calling it the Breton Bay Greenway, that really starts to link all these pieces together, not just along the waterfront, but to the neighborhoods, existing and future neighborhoods. With the pathway system, there should be a variety of loops, so someone could take a short circuit or a long circuit and really accommodate a lot of different experiences and activities along the way, highlighting history, highlighting culture, highlighting the environment. So this is just an overlay of the overall plan. The heavy blue line, this is the Wharf down at the lower right in Port of Leonardtown. I think that's McIntosh Park up at the upper left. And so the heavy line, that's really the main trail right along the waterfront in the lower part, but then it moves up to a little higher land, a bluff overlooking the water. And then what these connections back, we think are important connections. They're through some of the drainage ravines. So they could be public connections through open space fingers back up to Fenwick, the sidewalk system along Fenwick Street extended, and then even connect up to the elementary school and to the park that I'll be talking about shortly. These dashed arrows are would have been proposed all along connecting to the development parcels in Tudor Hall Farms. We think it's important, though, that not everyone that wants to access the trail has to drive down these streets, park along the streets where people are living to access it, and that's where some of these finger trail connections through the public ravines come into play. There's an area, there's a plateau of open land here that's town-owned. We're calling this the Meadow. We think that's an opportunity, and I'll talk about that shortly. But these are just some precedent images. This is that section that would, if you can imagine, this is Breton Bay, and we're looking towards the Wharf. This is the section where the steep slope comes right down to the water. That section would need to be built as a boardwalk, or like along Lake Champlain here, out on some stone riprap, and this is a crushed stone base. But there'll have to be some structure along the waterfront to accommodate the trail. There could be some overlooks, some expanded deck areas to take advantage of water views. And then as we get more inland, we could explore other treatments. This image on the right is a new portion of the Jones Falls Trail in Baltimore, and I thought it was a perfect example because we have some of the ravines leading up from the waterfront are similar to this. And to just do all the grading to put a paved trail in, you'd impact a lot of trees and things like that. So there may be some sections like this where you have some boardwalk that really works with the topography and weaves in and out of that. Though in some of the wet areas, this is up in outside of Wilmington, Delaware, it might have a situation like that. Other areas will have some bridge crossings of a variety of ways. There may even be some of the smaller tributaries, some stepping stone. But the idea, and these are some, not the main pathway, but some nature trails that offshoot the main path. But the idea is to really capitalize on a bunch of different experiences and different abilities. And then a good bit of it would be paved, like this is the trail network in Columbia. In the lower right image shows this is the main trail around Lake Elkhorn in Columbia, and then the lower right is the spur that connects back up into one of the neighborhoods. So that would be a similar situation that we would have here. And then some of in some areas they might be just soft natural surface trails. There might be on some of the steep slopes some nature trails for allow for some exploration of different habitats, but there's a lot of opportunities that open up there. And then where the trail interfaces with the amphitheater area, the Wharf or the hotel area, there might be some opportunities to incorporate public art or more interpretive and break away from the more environmental aspect of it and start to brand it with some of the art and that you have going on through town, and murals and sculpture. This is in Hagerstown along their cultural trail, and it just highlights key figures in the community. It's just taking advantage. You had a chain link fence there, and so taking advantage of that with highlighting people in the community. And then the symbol that we came up with, the Breton Trail logo, could become an emblem in the pavement, much like this has become for the Hagerstown Cultural Trail. So there's a lot of opportunities there. And then, of course, continue what you've done at the Wharf with environmental interpretation and historical interpretation, education. And then the image on the right is from the Pinellas Trail in Dunedin, Florida. And what we're really excited, this trail is it's an old rail to trail, but it's a heavily used bike and pedestrian trail. It's maybe a block off Main Street. But all the businesses, there's promotions of the businesses along Main Street because showing the bikers how close you could come here to restaurants. The restaurants along this trail all face out onto the trail, so they really engage it. And so trails, it's not just a recreational amenity; they become economic development as well. if you leverage them the right way. Along the trail, I talked about the meadow. That's blowing, zooming in on this area. This is a plateau, so that could be. It's not wooded right now, so you could really take advantage of that landscape as something completely different, a different experience what you have through the wooded sections or along the waterfront section. It's just examples, and you can almost imagine this connection going through the meadow back up into the development of the future development of Tudor Hall Farm. So some implementing actions, Tudor Hall Farms planning to date has already looked at, making sure they connect to the Greenway, so continuing that dialogue with them, exploring some of the feasibility of the trail connections through those stream valleys. It may not be all three that I was showing, but there may be one there that would be the priority, preparing some of those detailed plans. And then making sure, as planning for hotel and amphitheater and other things go forward, that you're always looking at the interface of how they can work with the trail and that they're kind of designed together. A project that we're really excited about is what we're calling Fenwick Lawn. This is that park space. It's really centrally located. It's the one area within this whole open space network that you could really have more active recreation. You have some flatter land, you're not through environmentally sensitive land. So this is the plan. This would be Fenwick Street extended. This is Shepherd's Old Field right here. This is the outdoor Bruta Garden. We're showing here long-term extending Barthelm, is that how you say it? Barthelm. Extending that street. Fenwick is sent, and so we think it's really important. Some of the best parks are surrounded by public street edge that you have the eyes on the park, the images, the visibility of the park. Especially with Fenwick Street coming in from the west, this will be a new entrance to downtown, and what a phenomenal gateway to downtown to have a park. And then this is just showing how new long-term infill development as part of the mixed use with Tudor Hall Farm can start to reinforce that street edge, that urban street edge of Fenwick Street, to pick up on what you have in downtown, but then it transitions into a very park-like character as you move to the west. And just zooming in, some of the active design, so you have the flexibility for a large recreation field, but it's not designed as a sports park. You can play a soccer game there, but it's really designed as an open greensward with trees surrounding it, framing that space, a pathway system that again allows someone to do a long loop around the whole park or a series of smaller loops depending on what their desire is for the day. We heard a lot about a desire for pickleball, a dog park. We're showing that in this area. A playground. This is a natural stream channel, so this would be a naturalized area that separates this area from the multi-purpose field. And then you can see we're showing parallel parking along the edges of these edge streets, so not putting a parking lot in the park, but really let that happen along the edge. And some of the activity here is a natural extension of some of the activity that's happening outside of Shepherd's Old Field. And then an aerial view showing how that works. It's a little easier to see in perspective. Again, the dog park, the pickleball, the playground, the wooded stream valley, and then the open flexible field area. And some precedent imagery, all the great parks, it might be a stretch to compare this to Central Park, but the concept is here. It's only larger. The empty, these are 6 softball fields, but they're designed into they fit into this open greensward. It feels like you're just playing ball in a park versus you're in a rec center. And then all great parks, whether it's a Savannah Squares or Prospect Park, have this central lawn area and surrounded by edges. You might celebrate at all the corners, the entrances to the park that you see in that example. And then Bryant Park is a great example of a central flexible lawn, but then a lot of stuff happening along the edges. And we showed pickleball and playground, but there might be ping pong tables, there might be shuffleboard, there might there might be a push and a contingency that wants to push for something, but along those edges is where that would happen. So continue to work with Tudor Hall Farms on some of the open space easements along the western portion of that parkland. As Fenwick Street extended is designed, want to make sure that that's designed with the sensitive understanding that could interface with a future park there. And then look at the feasibility, or at least have on the planning, the long-term extensions of some of those adjacent streets, whether those extensions happen in the short term or long term, but just plan for that to happen if it makes sense. And then, obviously go to the next step of doing the detailed plan for that park. And then the last area that we want to focus on is what we're calling West Fenwick, and this is kind of the westward expansion of downtown. We're over the square looking to the west, the Tudor Hall Farm area back in here. And the real goal here is to create a seamless connection between the square and Tudor Hall Farm. That there's Tudor Hall Farm appears as a natural extension of the community versus a gated separate community separate from the downtown. So we were showing, just for orientation, down at the bottom, this is the hotel site we were looking at. Up at the left here, this is Fenwick Lawn, the park we were just looking at. Again, Shepherd's Old Field with the number 18, and then the square right in here. So we know there's someone looking at potential townhouses on some of the old Chevrolet dealership property. That will be a great use to extend, get more residential downtown, but also start to extend that to the west. And then what we're showing is a suggested development pattern and street network for this portion of Tudor Hall Farms, which would be mixed use. We're saying this, we're suggesting and encouraging that this area is left as a placeholder for a future parking deck if you would ever need one. It's central to, it's fairly close to the amphitheater, it's close to the square, it's close to any new development here and the park, so it's centrally located as downtown expands to the west. Again, it may be a while before that would happen, but it's just keeping a placeholder in there. And then you see some of these trail extensions through these open space fingers that would link to some of this development as well as the park down to the waterfront. And just some examples of urban infill in other communities that's kind of at the appropriate scale for Leonardtown, 2- and 3-story buildings. All of these might not be exactly right, but just showing some good examples from other places with attention to architectural detail and scale and form. This is a new development in Mechanicsville, Pennsylvania, mixed-use residential above, some restaurant space below. You could see this fitting in scale-wise very well with Leonardtown. So, some implementing actions here is, continuing to work with, as you have been with the reuse of the auto dealership site. As you plan for, continue planning and integrate this into your comp plan, keep that placeholder for the parking deck. We continue to encourage the mixed-use development especially along Fenwick Extended, that you have some lower level retail, some of that square footage number that Tripp talked about, that there's some space accommodated and along Fenwick Street would be the place to do that. And then continue to explore a variety of housing types, whether it's senior living, other multifamily, stacked flats or stacked townhouses, getting that variety because there is a market for that appeal. So I've talked a lot. Tripp, give me a thumbs up if there's anything you wanted to add at this point. No, okay. So any questions, or how do we want to?
Do you have any on mine?
No, just some compliments.
Okay. That's always good.
I'll see if there's any out there.
Well,
Yeah.
I have a couple of things. My first question, which was answered later on, is what is a full-service hotel? So now I know. The increased population, I'm a voter. The increased population of the waterfront with the things you're putting towers up there, that's going to really increase the liability in terms of the waterfront, drowning kids, families. I live on the water. When people come and visit, if they have kids, immediately the rules come out. You got to wear life jackets when you go down and stuff. So it's already exists that way, and I don't know that there's ever even been an incident. But when you're going to increase the population down there hugely, that just has to be taken into account.
Yeah.
Then I was thinking, as a voter, I'm coming into the new pier, which will be larger when the next phase goes through. How are the boaters gonna react to, I think very positively, to have those things right there when they get off the boat. If they're staying overnight, if it's noisy, that's something else, but these things all fit in together. Any plans for having marina facilities with the lodge? Because the Holiday Inn has a spectacular marina attached to it, just happens to be on John Creek there.
Yeah.
Back Creek, I can't remember which creek it is. And, you know, you have the access to the water, but that's big environmental stuff and all this other things. But something that would bring in people by boat and they'd stay at the hotel. Then lastly, I was just thinking, I did some quick searching on my phone. The Holiday Inn, which has been a dump for years, I know John Simpson, the owner. You go in there, you wipe your feet as you're walking out. They had a total, I just looked it up, 20,000 square feet of meeting room. The largest was 5,830 feet. I've been at meetings there. The Hilton Garden Inn at Sullivan's has 18 meeting rooms. 7,500 square feet is their largest spot. They don't have 20,000 square feet, but it is a conference center, which is 2-minute drive away from the Holiday Inn. Thing is, it's very plain. It would not be part of just an amazing destination, which Leonardtown would become if all these things happen. The Hilton Garden Inn is just this, it's a nice modern looking building and it's better shape than the Holiday Inn, but there's nothing special about it other than that it's a 5-minute drive to Sullivan's Waterfront.
Yeah.
So there is another conference center there, it's just not, it's not 25,000 to 50,000 square feet,
Yeah.
which you would have, and we have everything else beautiful around it.
Yeah, and I think again here the emphasis is on a conference that you're really taking that whole environment that it has into account, and it's going to appeal not only to meeting space but also family reunions and wedding venues, and where you take the whole environment into account.
But a lot of the business the Holiday Inn does is people coming in by boat and then booking hotel rooms.
Yeah.
Because you'll have someone come in by boat and then family members will come in from DC, Baltimore, other places and book in and they'll have a whole weekend there together. And one family's come by boat and the other people have booked in. So somehow tying the lodge in with the existing marina or other marina facilities would just enhance it.
Great.
Anybody else? Ken?
So, fantastic presentation. There's obviously two different aspects of how all this gets paid for. Some of it's private enterprise, and then some of it is obviously tax dollars and stuff like that. Can you go into like the actual paths and all that stuff? Is that a city project? And then all these individual things that you're showing, like the hotel would obviously have to be a private investor. You showed the pavilion down at the Wharf where that piece of property we know is currently for sale or whatever and stuff like that. So where you're anticipating bringing in private dollars, and what else is being taken care of by the city and the tax dollars, like the path and all that stuff? Is that something that the city is involved with, or how does that work?
We've kind of talked about this, but it's going to be a mix. I mean, and it's going to happen over time. So, I mean, we don't have a specific budget for this plan, because, I mean, this is a long-term plan.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the actual paths and stuff like that, that's going to be a city project, is that correct? And not
It may be part,
a
you know,
private developer?
it could be part of the development that's happening. I mean, all of
It's going to be a partnership.
Yeah.
Both public-
Yeah, a lot of times, depending on the section of the path, it would make sense to happen with the private development. Other sections would make sense to be done, you know, more as a public project, but it's going to be a combination.
Yeah, the property where the hotel will be, possibly.
Right.
We were given that from the state, so it's not like we can sell that or anything. So-
Understood.
So it's going to be a public-private partnership. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
You had, sir, did you have a?
Well, and maybe a lot of people in this room have sat through this same presentation about 15, 20 years ago down at Chipper's house. And, you know, they had Gary Player there, no offense, they had Gary Player there, and they told us, you know, the same type of thing. I know that Leonardtown's in a different place because I was here then and I'm here now. But realistically, I guess my question would be, that looks awesome. You know, it really looks awesome. Is there a good hope, like, that's going to happen? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, well, and that's where we look at the market numbers, and I'll turn Trip on in a minute. Yeah, I think Leonardtown's in a very different place now. And, you know, plans, Trip's from Greenville, South Carolina. I work there a lot, and they've called that the 40-year overnight success story because, you know, 40 years ago, I mean, that community is completely turned around, and things that people never would have imagined happening there are happening. But 40 years ago, you would have said, how is this ever going to happen? So, you know, part of the planning process is to get the vision on paper so that there's a guideline and framework that then, you know, Lachelle and Dan and others could start to take this to generate interest, talk to developers, garner some of that interest. But it is a different place. The numbers, the market numbers are showing it as well. And Trip, do you want to, you're on now, Trip. Or, no, he isn't. How do we? What? Okay.
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 Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. That is a great question, and I recognize the similarities that people might see between the plan years ago and the current one. The market conditions now are such that, you know, it's even more robust than we would have ever imagined, you know, then. And the situation is different too. And in a way, I'm kind of relieved that time got in the way of that prior plan for a couple of reasons. One, the golf course concept is one that they're just not money makers anymore, and we even see, you know, across the country, and I'm experiencing this in my own community where they're decommissioning golf courses and turning them into walking trails and amenity spaces. So, you know, rather than be kind of a place for golfers, the public areas here are a place for everyone. And then, you know, the hotel market, I think we're going to continue to see robust development. There was a comment earlier on the meeting space at the Hilton Garden Inn. Actually looked at 3 counties, including Annapolis, on the size of the meeting spaces, just to make sure that what we were recommending was kind of right-sized for the potential of Leonardtown. I do see this project coming together. It will come together over a long time, but you know, there are critical things here that that are kind of foregone conclusions, like the connection of Fenwick is, you know, I mean, that's kind of a must-have for this property over time, and having that continued greenway is a tremendous asset. So I see it, you know, the success of this, really the numbers point in the right direction.
Is the X off now? Okay.
Talking about 40 years ago, we had 20 boarded up buildings downtown here, so we have come a long way. Now, this isn't going to happen overnight, but you've got to have a plan in place to make sure it goes in the right direction.
Yeah.
Now, is it all going to happen? Probably not. But while we're planning for the future, let's have some ideas in place.
Yeah, one of the things, you know, I like to look at as a master plan is not only a plan to outline a bunch of things you're going to do, but it's put a plan in place to keep you from doing the wrong things. You know, we've worked in so many places where, you know, the leadership said, oh, if only we didn't build that fire hall right in the middle of this lot, because that's, so it's putting this place, and you're the benefit that you own that property where the hotel would be, so you have the luxury of saying, let's wait for the right thing. Let's not just rush off to develop anything there. So it's just to make sure you have a vision in place and a framework that guides it. And like Dan said, it's not gonna happen exactly the way it's outlined here, but it's a framework to guide that. Yes?
Which portion of this plan would you want to implement first?
Well, I think the Fenwick Street extended is going to be an important part, especially as Tudor Hall Farms develops. That's connection. The Wharf and the Waterfront area, certainly those things could happen. Most of your infrastructure is already there. That could happen. I think a lot of it's really going to be, where do you have the interest, and where, especially in the private sector, where do you have some bites and people say, hey, I want to be a part of this, whether it's a restaurant or another business. So,
Personally, I would love the trails.
yeah. And what's great about the trail system, that can happen incrementally too. You could start with a section extending from the wharf and then looping up to where the amphitheater would be, and create a loop back, and then that gets built upon as you go along.
We want to have this in place before Tudor Hall residential development gets going, which isn't that far away. He wants to have it ready to go when the Meadows of Town Run are about done. So, they're moving quick out there. So, we need to have this in place to make all those figures into that area. Work with both the development and what we want to see, and that includes the trails.
And just a comment, when you talk about public and private, it's not just the town as public money. Leonardtown does a fantastic job working with both the county and the state, and I think Port of Leonardtown is the best example of how everybody came together to make that project happen. And I think a lot of these things, there will be other monies available, and that Leonardtown is very good at accessing that, and we've had so many good projects that a lot of times when we come forward with another one, these agencies will say, we've seen what they've done, we know what they can do, and we're gonna give them a hand with this.
The South Grant.
Yeah, you're building on success here.
You have to add a 1 to the population that's moving in, because I'm moving away. I'm a Fenwick County, they don't do anything.
Did you have
Thank you
anybody
all very
online?
much. Any other questions before we wrap it up?
Yeah, which we kind of answered. Okay. We were just seeing if there was anybody online that had a question.
Okay.
But,
Will the presentation be available?
yes, we will be putting it on our website.
Great. Well, thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trip.